And we join you every week to talk about trending topics in the wine world. And how are you this week, Mark?
Everything is great, Kim. Always
Very
good
good.
to talk wine with you and our listeners
Always.
every week.
Indeed. And we always try to bring you articles and updates from the world of wine. And our first one today, we wanted to talk to you about an article that was in Wine Enthusiast about how to find the wines you want. And I really liked this little piece because it reminded me of back in my retail days when I would have customers come in and be like, we had this wine on our honeymoon and it was 10 years ago. Can you find it for us? And it was always this fun little adventure that I could go on to try to find this very particular wine for people that there was something near and dear about this wine to a customer. And it really added this emotional experience to wine drinking, and I always got a big kick out of doing that. And I'm sure that you run into this question an awful lot, don't you, from your customers, Mark?
Yeah, it is fun to research or find what people are looking for. And it could be something you found that you had at a restaurant that you might not have seen in retail. It might be maybe just something that became your new.
Shall we get this show on the road tonight? Call to order the January 11th, 2023 Finance Committee meeting. First order of business, public comment.
Hold on.
Oh, we're not, stand by.
Okay. Well, it just takes a second to load.
I'm on.
Recording in progress.
Go for it, Drew. Go good.
Okay, we'll call to order again, the January 11th, 2023 council meeting. The first order of business is public comment. Mr. Sherlock has something to say.
Yes. Happy New Year first.
Thank you.
Steve Sherlock, Lawrence Drive, correspondent for Franklin Matters, Franklin Public Radio. As part of a round that I'm starting to make for meetings that I attend and participate in, a friendly reminder in regards to the use of the microphones and the high-tech equipment that we do have. This is a high-tech audio recording and TV recording studio, but they work very well when they're used properly. And having seen a number of other meetings, and certainly this current company generally is good, but some of your other brethren, and they're all volunteers, so I can't really berate them that much, but some of your other brethren don't use them that well. And just a reinforcement of that. Quick little story, many years ago I was a track coach, relay coach, and I taught my students and runners the baton is what they need to love. Because if they ran the race, no matter how fast they did, but didn't take the baton with them to the finish line, their race didn't count. While you're here volunteering your time, which we thoroughly appreciate, providing insights on our behalf for financial issues, which we thoroughly appreciate. But if people can't hear you and the audience can't hear you, you haven't really done the job. So, friendly reminder, use the microphone. It is good. Make sure you're speaking towards it, enunciating clearly, and everything else will happen perfectly. And I thank you for your time.
Steve, could you make that same speech at the council meeting? Thank you very much.
I intend to. I did school committee last night. So
Okay.
you're in the
Thank
second
you.
in the round.
Thank you. We have no minutes for approval tonight. Last ones with the school committee were lengthy and complicated, so they're not quite done yet. Suspect someone may be working on them. First order of real business is the compensation and classification study. And it looks like Mr. Helen is almost ready.
Not really.
Not really.
Hi, Joe Allen.
You need to enable her so she is sharing
Hello.
her screen.
I know, I don't,
Well, so
you know how to,
what's her?
Joe Allen
Yeah, there. And
can
then,
make co-host?
no, actually, under security.
Full screen?
Yeah, enable share screen. You she should be able to share the screen. Which she's going to do.
Right,
Right. So,
okay. Hey, Joellen,
Hello.
you there? Yep.
I
So I
am
think
here.
you should be able to have screen sharing privileges if you want to load up the PowerPoint, or if you want to give some opening remarks, feel free before we get started.
Hold on, let me make sure this is
Okay.
going to work.
So as a quick intro, oh, perfect. So as a quick intro, Mr. Chairman, now that we have it up. Great. So as a quick intro, Mr. Chairman, and those watching at home, the first item on tonight's agenda is the Town of Franklin's Employee Classification and Compensation Study. Just as a background, I'll have some comments once Joellen goes through the presentation. A draft copy of the final report was included in the packet tonight. I'll let Joellen get started, but I just want to let everybody know this has been many years in the making. And I want to thank Karen Brad to the left of me for her incredible work on this. We've been aiming at this for many years, and somehow we were able to cobble together the time with GovHR to get this compensation study done. I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end, but we'll start off with Joellen Calamadori from GovHR to give a short PowerPoint presentation and to discuss the methodology as to how we went about this, why this is important, and where do we go from here. Joellen?
Okay, thank you, and good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm Jo Ellen from GovHR, and I'm happy to be presenting a draft final report to you tonight. We can make some final edits if need be, but generally it's in its format as far as the structure is concerned. And just by way of background, I was fortunate to work in local government in Massachusetts for about 17 years, and I've been consulting for over 10 now. I'm out of Illinois, but it's been a pleasure working with the town, with the employees, with the administration. Everybody has been really terrific, and this type of study does take a lot of hands-on work with the project team, which was, it did happen, and it was very helpful. You know, it's a partnership. It's one of those types of studies where we don't just make a recommendation. There really is a lot of discussion throughout. So tonight I will go over the scope of work we were asked to perform for the town, the job evaluation process that we conducted. We've developed a new classification plan as a result of that job evaluation. We then did a compensation study by setting some comparable communities, getting some information from the market, analyzing that, and developing a compensation plan to go along with the classification plan. And then there's a strategy to implement, although my recommendation is pretty general. It could be more specific with regard to the town and its intentions. And then how would you manage the system going forward? So the first part of the study was really just the job analysis portion and developing that classification plan. And getting it started, we had to have some meetings, we had to have some discussion about study expectations, and then just get a lot of information to me, a lot of documents, job descriptions, pay plans, just a lot of information from the town in order for us to start the work. We then went through a process to determine comparable communities to Franklin, from whom we requested information to develop the compensation plan. We also distributed materials to the employees. We had some kickoff meetings to talk with them about the study, what it was not, asked them to participate and fill out the questionnaires for us so we could do the job evaluation process. And then we did conduct that process. We developed a classification plan, and through that process, we had interviews with employees in Franklin so we could really understand the work and how you do it in your community. I think something that's unique about this type of work is that every community is different. You know, if you went to Walpole or you went to Marlborough, you know, somebody might have a similar job, but they may have some nuances to that job. You know, so the work in Franklin is unique to your community, and that's why we have to have employees participate, which they did, and they were terrific. And we had to have some interviews so we could really understand how you perform your work there. We then did the compensation analysis by putting together a survey, getting information from the market, and we analyzed that. So what you have in front of you tonight is what we call the draft of the final report. You know, there's still some time to make a few edits if necessary. I'll talk with you about it tonight. Happy to answer any questions that you have. Once we receive the final feedback, we will finalize the report for you. So the first portion of the study was the job evaluation portion, and there were 87 positions that we looked at through this process. So the way that we get information and do job evaluation is through a questionnaire. We call it our job analysis questionnaire. And every employee covered by the study was asked to fill out a questionnaire about their position, not about their individual background, but about their position. And if they left, what were the minimum qualifications needed to be to perform the work. And you can see here, our job evaluation system has 9 factors, ranging from education, experience, decision-making, which gets to the overall complexity of the work. We talk about policy making, planning of work, meaning how much latitude do you have to plan your work and do you plan the work of others, the contact that you're having with each other and stakeholders or other people in the community, vendors, developers, things of that nature, whether or not people supervise or assign work, what is their work environment and physical demands, which correlates with the Americans with Disabilities Act. And then our last factor is technological proficiency. So it not only measures use of computers, but it also measures overall proficiency. And so we bring in looking at equipment operation, dexterity, things of that nature as well. So we went through and asked people to fill out a questionnaire and answer questions in relation to these 9 factors. So when we did the job evaluation, we had virtual interviews, and as a result of that and the job evaluation and the analysis process, we developed something, what we refer to as internal equity. So in order to do that, we have to get feedback from the employees on the questionnaire. We then ask the supervisors to comment on the employees' perception of their work, and then we conduct a virtual interview to really look at everything. And we make an assessment based on that interview. What happens with the questionnaires is they're scored, and they are developed into a classification plan. So if you have the report in front of you, the classification plan that we're recommending starts on page 24 of the printed report or 27 of the PDF. But the classification plan develops internal equity, or it establishes internal equity, which is really important. And what that means is positions that scored similarly overall, after looking at the 9 factors, are assigned to the same grade. And what that tells us is the positions that are in the same grade have similar complexities. They need similar knowledge, skills, and ability overall to do the work, and therefore they're internally comparable, so they should be in the same grade. And then what that ends up turning into afterwards is pay equity. So positions that are in the same grade will have the same pay range assigned to them. So internal equity guarantees pay equity. Pay equity, or the Equity Pay Act, is a law in Massachusetts, and this system complies with that law. So that's the classification plan side. It was looking at all the positions. We developed that classification plan. It's in table 1 of the report, and it has 15 different grades. And there were a few recommendations for some title changes. On the compensation side, we went through and we looked at different criteria in order to determine comparable communities to Franklin. And so this information and this analysis is in Appendix B of the report. Appendix A is that job analysis questionnaire I just talked about. Appendix B is the analysis we went through to determine comparable communities. And so we look at that information. It's sourced from the Department of Revenue. And we look at population and proximity. You can see the first and last criteria, but everything sandwiched in the middle is financial information. And we get all of that from the Department of Revenue. And then we put it into a spreadsheet. We do our initial review. We do some weighting. We sort it a couple of different ways. And I understand there was something with the population sort, but it didn't affect the comps. We rectified that. But we ended up with the top comparable communities based on this methodology. And for your study, these were your top communities. So this is in alphabetical order. It's not in the order of the closest community as far as the top comparable community, but these were the communities to which we compared. And what's good about it is you can see it's 86 points out of a total 100 points. So they're very strong comps as far as ability to pay. You know, those financial factors really establish ability to pay. So we want to try and find communities that are close in that regard. So these are the ones that we used for Franklin. The other thing about the salary survey is that, just a few points. When we do a salary survey, we define the job. And the reason why we do that is because if you go to another community, it may or may not have the same title. So we want to make sure we're getting that real comparison of information for the same position. We do review the data to make sure that it's relevant. If for some reason some data points are not relevant, in Appendix C of the report is all of the data. If you see any highlighting and then the word edited, it means that we didn't agree with some data points and we remove them, but we're very transparent in the work so you can see that. Another thing that's important is what data do we use once we receive this information? We ask for minimum salary for the position, maximum salary, and actual, because sometimes communities don't have a salary range. But we prefer to use a salary range because it's a better gauge of the market value of the job. You know, if we only have an actual salary, we don't know the market conditions under which someone was hired, nor do we know their tenure. And we know with the economy the way it is right now, it would be all over the place if we only had actual salaries to rely on. So for you, we had a lot of range data, which was good, and we could base our analysis on that. And then the last point is when we do a salary survey, it's a snapshot in time. So we gathered this information last year. When you maintain your system going forward, you can update it to make sure it's competitive with the market, but it's a snapshot in time. So if for some reason, one of those comparable communities had not adjusted their pay ranges for the current fiscal year, it will eventually catch up. But if I'm an employee in Franklin and say, you know, the first community was Attleboro, if I was seeking a position in Attleboro, if they were a year behind with their wages, their pay plan, that's still the value of the job at that time, during that period of time. So that's the market. But again, there's a way to maintain it going forward, and communities that update their pay plans, you eventually capture that in subsequent years. So the next thing is the Table 2, which is the proposed compensation plan. And that is on page 27 of the PDF and 30 of the, 27 of the printed version, 30 of the PDF. But what we call our comprehensive table brings together is the classification plan that I just mentioned, and then the compensation data from the market. So that's what Table 2 is. It just brings together classification and compensation. And we calculated ranges at the 75th percentile of the data we received from the market. So if you're interested in looking at the exact pay ranges, the very next table in the report, Table 3, is just the pay ranges. That's on page 30 of the printed version and 33 of the PDF. The way that we calculate those ranges and the reason why they're broken out is so I can explain to you and show to you how we are able to match the market data to the classification plan, which I'll speak to in a minute. But we did calculate at the 75th percentile, which is competitive. You know, and the reason why you want to do that and the reason why you want to consider being there as a payer is because it allows you to attract and retain employees. In the market right now, if you're going much below that, you're going to have a harder time recruiting and retaining people. And what the 70th percentile represents is 25% of communities pay more for the same position, 75% pay less. You know, if you're at the 50th percentile, you'd be in the exact middle. And the 50th percentile may or may not be above average. So at the 75th, you know you'll be above average, and that's a good message to send to the market as well as your existing employee and population for a way to retain people. So the 15 compensation grades are broken out to 3 bands, or I should say 3 bands, but actually 4. There's one separate one. But the first 6 grades are the administrative and technical band, then 7 through 11 are the supervisors and advanced technical, and then 12 through 15 are the directors and senior managers, and that's broken into 2 groups, A and B. But the reason why we put positions in bands is because if I was in a position, if I came to work for the town of Franklin and I started in a position in grade 2, for example, if I wanted to move into a position in grade 3 or 4 in the administrative and technical band, with some time in service, I should be able to do that. But if I wanted to move into a position in the advanced technical and supervisory band or the directors and senior managers band, it's going to require not only possibly time in service, but more education and training as well. So that's the first reason why you do the bands. The second reason why is by looking at the information, the compensation information within the band, we can actually better match the compensation data to the ranges that we're recommending. So we look at the first band exclusively to the second to the third. So it's a way to look at things separately. And then the way the table 3 that I was talking about is how we calculate the ranges. So we have 2 tools to do that. So again, I would look at all the data in grades 1 through 6 and say, okay, what is the market telling me? Where should I start grade 1 and where should I end grade 6 based on the market data? And the 2 tools that we use in order to calculate that are gradation and range spread. So the first thing here is the range spread. And you can see that we have a 40% spread for all of the grades except for grade 15. That actually goes up to a 50% spread. And the range spread is the difference between minimum pay and maximum pay. So every maximum pay, with the exception of 15, is 40% higher than the minimum pay for each grade. And then the other tool we use is gradation, which is the difference between starting pay. So you can see here it's different. For grades 1 through 6, it's 7.5%, 7 through 11, it's 5%, and then it goes back up to 17.5% for 12 through 14. So all that means is grade 2 starting pay is 7.5% higher than grade 1. Grade 3 is 7.5% higher than grade 2. So by moving the gradation and looking at that range spread, we can closely as possible match the market to the data and the ranges that we're recommending. So as far as going forward, you have the tools to maintain the classification plan. You know, we spent a lot of time looking at the positions and where they actually fell in the classification plan. So the town is familiar with our whole system. We have a manual that the town has. They have the job factor analysis tool. They have the questionnaire. So in the event you have to change a job in the future, add a job, abolish a job, you can do that. And as long as you're maintaining it, you know, every year, if you're just looking at things to make sure that the classification plan is up to date, this system will last you for a long time, you know, 10, 15 years, you know, unless Franklin adds a tremendous amount of jobs that might, you know, change things, it should last you for a long period of time. And then on the compensation side, what you want to do is look at what those comparable communities are doing every year, you know, and see what they're doing for their general increase. You know, is it 2%? Is it 3%? What is it? And if you're looking at that and adjusting those ranges, the minimum and the maximum, by the same amount, then you'll stay competitive with the market. And just like I said before, for the community that might have been behind, you know, when you find out where they are and you start to take that into account, you bring everything up to date. So if you do those 2 things, the system will last you for a long time on the classification side, and your pay will stay competitive with the market, so you won't have to do a study like this. You can always do another compensation study, you know, 5 years or so down the road, just to make sure that things haven't changed too much. But on the classification side, it should be sound for a longer period than that. So that's my general overview of the study, and I'm happy to answer any questions, unless, Jamie, if you wanted to talk a little bit more about implementation.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Joellen. That was incredibly well done. I just want to add in a couple of quick points, Mr. Chairman. As Joellen kind of just mentioned, but I was going to mention as my lead point, this is the first time the town of Franklin, at least on the municipal side, has ever done this. In the past, it was just kind of cherry plucking towns around here or nearby and kind of writing something down, and there was really no actual methodology associated with it. And as I think we just learned, Joe Ellen's been doing these studies for Massachusetts communities for years. There's a lot of other of our comparables even that have used GovHR to do their methodology. If you look through the report, one of the other features in there is that it really does expand out the factors of comparables. Traditionally, communities use population, right? But as I frequently say, the town of Danvers is a great example where we compare with Danvers extremely well in terms of population, tax levy size, and a lot of the features that Joe Ellen mentioned, commercial industrial versus residential tax rate. But it's just highly unlikely that someone's going to drive from Marblehead to Franklin for a job, right? So considering things like proximity, tax levy, which we've talked about at the Finance Committee and at many department head meetings, is comparable, size of budget. And so she's really got a great methodology that incorporates numerous factors into what determines what exactly your comparable communities are. And I think if you look in the report in the back, and we will correct that one table where the numbers were splintered up. If you look in the back, you'll notice that there's actually there's about 36 communities that were looked at. So those were just some of the highlights up there on the screen. I think about a dozen towns or so. And just for folks watching at home, it goes without saying, and I know there are probably some people that are watching that have asked me a lot of questions about this stuff, and Karen over the last year or two. As Joe Ellen pointed out, this study evaluates the position, okay, not the individual. I think naturally our minds gravitate towards the individual, right, and say, well, what is that person doing? Are they doing better than what's expected, lesser than what's expected? Really didn't take into consideration any of that. What's taken into consideration is really a true market analysis based off an actual formula methodology, which is really important because ultimately if the town, and I know the school district is also dealing with the same issues, if we are going to recruit and we are going to retain, we have to evaluate and make sure we're strategically putting resources into the positions that are most critical, that it's going to make us keep those great employees here or allow us to recruit them in certain examples where we've had some high-level jobs that have been vacant for a while, and we do need to make those adjustments to make sure we can even get somebody into the job at all. And so I just want to make sure that folks are very clear about that. This is not an analysis. This is not a performance review. This is not someone going in or any of us going in saying that person's doing a good job or a bad job or an okay job or just enough of a job. It's really evaluating the positions. I think one of the other strong reasons why we also went with Joe Ellen in her methodology was it empowers the employee, which she highlighted, but it empowers the employee. Our employees filled out these JAQ forms, and they went through their supervisors to work with them about what their jobs are. And if I may just give one example of one individual that was probably not classified as well as they could have was the director of recreation. Once they went through that process and saw like what they were actually doing in terms of working with the school district really closely, and all of the other things that Ryan does, just as one example, I think Ryan, as one example, kind of illuminated to this process and was like, wow, I hadn't sat down for 15 years and really thought about what am I actually doing every day. And then Joe Ellen's methodology goes out and looks at those comparables and says, based on that work that person is doing in the job description that we have in Franklin, where are those other comparables, and are we compensating those individuals properly to make sure that while I believe and all of us hope, we know Ryan is the GOAT at recreation, but if he's not here someday for some reason, what is going to maintain our competitive advantage to make sure we can get somebody, which we probably will never get anybody like Ryan, but in all seriousness, someday somebody's going to leave and we're going to have to fill those jobs. And to make sure that we're paying enough to be able to recruit some of those top positions. Just a couple of other urban myths I'd like to bust because I know people are probably watching on TV live at home. What this is not an automatic increase for every single person to see that they're going to get a huge raise at the maximum level of the grade, okay? This is not also, as many people have asked me, this is not an equalizing program to adjust for inflation, okay? This is not a system to showcase where we're going to be able to pay somebody right away the top dollar figure in any grade. In terms of implementation, what we've tried to do is look out over maybe about 2 or 3 years and try to chip away at some of the areas that we're most in need. And I can say right now, while some of that implementation is going to be fluid based on the budgets coming up, the clear need was at the top grades for the top positions, the chief of police, fire chief, DPW director, town attorney, finance director, if you look at the grade 15, and also making sure our lowest paid employees are also being prioritized, because before this study got started and before we saw where the comparables were, our lowest paid employees were really, really lowly paid. I think one of the biggest gaps we had was almost $30,000, $35,000 were some of the gaps between market and what we were paying people. And obviously for some of those employees, we have to work through collective bargaining, right, with the library or custodial and DPW. But for the folks in here in grades 2, 3, 4, we really needed to prioritize those. So without a defined and concrete implementation plan, which we do not have to put up on the screen as of yet, but if people can visualize it, where the first phase is, are really the top and the lowest grades, and then over the course of the next year or two, we hope to kind of move further towards the middle. And what we've tried to prioritize as a baseline as well is making sure that at least everybody is within the minimum amount within their grade. So that's kind of the first round, if you will, of implementation. We've been able to make some of those adjustments already this fiscal year based on the data that Joe Ellens provide and working with our departments. And I'm sure when we get to the budget debate in April and May, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about, based on the revenues we have and based on the priorities of the departments and the feedback we get from the public, we'll be able to analyze how much more of an investment we can make towards meeting some of those goals in the future. So in summary, I know I can speak for Karen, but I'm sure many of you will have questions for her as well. I'm exceptionally proud to have been able to get to this point. On the one hand, I know we all want to be Super Bowl winners, and we all want it all to go away and fix it all really quickly. And we will work towards that. It's going to be slow and steady. But to get to this point, as Joe Ellens said, where we actually now have a foundation to a house, we can basically continue to work on this and increase each year, whatever the COLA is every year. We talked about the COLA at the last meeting, 1%, 2%, 3%, whatever it is. We can continually keep up with this, look at the market. I mean, there's a lot of jobs out there. We do a lot of research ourselves, and be able to hopefully stay as competitive as possible as we try to make all of the adjustments throughout the entire plan that we can. We have over 300 employees. With the schools, we're well over 1,000 employees. We have a lot of people. And what we did find out really ultimately is I think a lot of cities and towns overall are probably underpaying people. And I think what we did find out is a lot of our employees overall within the marketplace, we do have some significant adjustments to make. It is a crazy marketplace right now. I don't know how to really describe it in short. It's a tough environment for hiring, especially at the top level and at the bottom level of the comp plan. And I'm really proud to have gotten the organization to this point, and I really feel that Joe Ellens given us a phenomenal foundation to move forward from. And I'm sure this isn't the last we'll talk about it, but that's where we're at right now, and obviously we're happy to answer any questions the committee might have. Thank you.
I have kind of question/comment. One was, I'm sure this is just a big boost to the HR department or whatever it is that you call, because it just seems like there's so much data. I was flipping through the survey, and that's significantly comprehensive what employees had to, and you said every single employee did it?
Every single employee filled out their own JAQ, and then we had them work with their own supervisors to go through and review those. And, the staff did a phenomenal job. They did work hard at these. They spent a lot of time on them. And we didn't just try to look at it, by the way, in terms of, it was tough, right? Some employees are looking out future years too, and they're trying to anticipate tasks that may come up. It's a little bit art and science, right? Karen was great, Joellen was great, and department heads, no, we're doing an analysis for right now with what you're doing today, with what's in your job description now. And I have no doubt that, especially in those middle grades, in those professional positions, I have no doubt that as services evolve and as departments evolve, I have no doubt that some of those job descriptions might evolve and those responsibilities might evolve. As we hire people, as you know, there's strengths and weaknesses we all have. And so I think as this goes on, this is a nice living and breathing document, hopefully, that we can continue on with year after year. And as Joellen said, maybe every 5 years or so, or 3 years, we put more money into the budget and we try to go back and do a review. But it did give the employees the power center of being able to define their job for what they do. And I think for a handful of departments, it was a very illuminating exercise to realize, geez, maybe we're doing a lot more than we thought we were. And maybe we're doing a lot more than what wasn't in our job description. So we tried not to be cold by saying, no, literally only today. I mean, we tried to work and mold with a few employees that had some questions about what they'd be doing, 6 months from now or a year from now. But it was really completely driven really by the employees. Yeah.
Yeah, so it seems, again, based on the question, so shout out to everybody for getting that done, because I'm sure that's just a lot of data that, again, you can now build on. And just want to clarify, so when you said you're kind of actioning on things, what I imagine is you have all your grade 1 through 15 and you have your range, right? And then you take your 300 employees and bloop, 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 and then power grid them, and that's kind of how you looked at it and said, like, we need to start attacking again where our major outliers are, and then our 1s and 15s and move in?
That's correct. And there's one other factor I would add into there. It's also what's available for resources. I mean, as everybody in this room knows, and I just happened to look over there to the school department too, I mean, I think we're all in the same boat on this. There's only so much. I think one of the hardest parts about local government in today's marketplace is that we're limited by Prop 2.5. If you're a business, you just raise the price on the product, or you shrink the product and you go make the adjustments and you pay people more. Or you give a bonus at the end of the year, or whatever the private sector models are. We don't really have that luxury. And I don't want to go too off the range, but this is going to be a significant issue in this era of inflation, which is not going to just magically go away tomorrow, where we are definitely losing people to the private sector. There's no question. And we can't just go raise the prices of goods and services to make up for that. We are completely stuck right here with 2.5. And as you all know, and everybody here knows, my predecessor and we go right up to the levy capacity every single year. Sometimes when some people say to me, how did Holliston or another community, how'd they raise taxes 7%, right, when you're only limited by 2.5? Well, that's because they have excess levy capacity, and I'm sorry to get geeky with terms, but this is critical stuff. They have excess levy capacity because they don't go up to their levy capacity every year. As long as I've been here, and certainly before me with Jeff, we always went to the levy capacity, which means there is no excess levy capacity, which means our revenues really do go up by the levy limit of 2.5% every year, sans new growth in licensing fees, which are more market-based as well. But we're limited in the availability of resources. So that's another factor involved in this with that strategy is making sure that those two levels at the 15 and the 2 were truly prioritized, because those are some of those critical jobs we have to fill or make those adjustments with the available resources we have.
Got it. Makes sense. Block and tackle as you can.
Block and tackle as you can.
Okay, got it. That's it on my end.
Anybody else? I have a couple. Do we have employees now, the range that's proposed here? Fiscal year 2023 compensation plan with all the grades. Do
Yep.
we have people that are significantly either below or above? And I don't think so, but are above in those. And if so, how do we fix that? Or do we have to fix it? Or?
We do. That's I'm trying to figure out. So that's like a 30-minute answer to some degree. We have. I think ultimately, as I just suggested a moment ago, the good news is right now we've been able to make the adjustments necessary to make sure everybody is paid appropriately within their grade. There are some that are at the top max of their grade. Not many, but some. And there are some that are at the bare minimum in their grade. Again, that comes back to available resources in trying to prioritize. There are also some positions that were extremely under market. And again, I would use one example of the recreation department as probably the prime example. The senior center as well is another example. You'll see that reflected in their FY24 budget. So, but I believe, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that as of now, everybody is at least within their grade being compensated for wherever they fell within that grade. And so, to me, that's like when we did equal pay for equal work several years ago. That's why when we've committed to paying the minimum wage as the bare minimum in town, even though we weren't for years, when you're able to be me or the HR director and say that everybody is at least within those bounds of their grade, that's a huge success. Not saying everybody's thrilled. Not saying there aren't more adjustments that have to get made, and not that there have to be other strategic initiatives. But to be in that position, sitting here tonight is for us, I think, a pretty significant achievement. And by no means is it over, but that's pretty good.
Second question. Yeah. Do we have the ability, either within this, let's say that somebody tries to poach T.J. Lynch.
Bad example.
Who we know is,
Can't do that.
all right, Sandini in the back.
You
Town of Hudson where he lives.
pick someone who's not here. Because there's nobody you're going to pick that. Anyways, go ahead. I get your point.
Do we have the ability, either through this or some other method, to stave off a poacher? Because, the money we've invested in training, for instance, TJ, is, the FBI Academy and whatnot, which gives him great credentials, and Cambridge comes and says, come on up. Do we have the ability?
He beat me to the punch.
You know what I'm saying?
There's nothing in here that's
Can we build it somehow?
There's nothing in here. No. There's nothing in here that's law. If somebody wanted to go recruit somebody and pay them, $350,000 a year, it's pretty hard to compete with that. What I would say is one of the things that did, in all the data, I'm appreciative, Natalie, that you saw the data, because both of us, and mostly her even, we were getting spun up with how much data was in there. It was incredible, right? Joellen's model is quite extensive. What we did find is a lot of towns they're paying people way out of class. It's almost like, why bother having a plan? So we addressed that actually with Joellen, and I think this reflects what I would consider actuals. And part of the reason why, Mr. Chairman, I did that was I looked at one community and I said, geez, their classification plan says the chief of police should make between $120,000 and say $180,000. But they're paying the police chief $200,000. So what good's the plan? Right? If you're doing all the numbers and they're doing 75% of it, what's good's the plan? So we took the actuals, right, to try to make sure that we're paying people within a plan. Otherwise, why have it? And it doesn't really give downstream everybody else confidence that they can't be paid out of class. So it gives everybody an argument. Well, pay everybody out of the classification plan. Then why have a plan? Why have this at all? Why is that important to your question? Because that's actually hopefully what does stave people off, is that they know our pay ranges are actually reflected now much more accurately based on reality than just a statistical formula. And so some people may look at that grade 15 and say, wow, that's quite a range. I can tell you most towns don't have a range that high, even those comparables like that, because we asked Joellen to take the actual salaries of what people were making and bring it through the methodology so that it would equalize it out, so we're not paying people more than what the plan says. And it also should give people over the next year, the year after that, the year after that, if you keep adding up each year 2.5%, 2.5%, 2.5% theoretically on a COLA, that should make us stay ahead of the curve. And so hopefully, hopefully everybody will approve all the capital requests from all of these guys tonight to make sure they all feel the support necessary to make sure they don't leave, and which is also a big factor, truly. But that's from a salary perspective. I think hopefully this also makes us look more attractive for people that are looking out there. And as we all know, all municipal employees look around for this stuff all the time. Especially in this job market, because most people are trying to take advantage of the economy and the market to better themselves, which they should, and we want to be in a position where we want the best to come here if we can do it.
Okay, the other question I have is, we talked with the schools last month, I guess. Is this type of study, should it be done on the school side?
So through you,
Is this more municipal stuff versus school stuff?
if they want to answer, I would say, so some of the jobs that were listed on here were central office school positions. And we had worked with the previous superintendent to identify those, the HR director. It wasn't every single position, I don't think, throughout the whole school department, obviously, but there were some identified. There were some comparables internally. Obviously, with the transition, we haven't had enough time, to be able to go through all that data. And I presume that when the new HR director comes on the school side, and when Lucas, if he ever has a minute, because he's a pretty busy guy, there'll be a time and a place for us to look at the data that Joe Ellen has gotten relative to those, dozen or so school department positions. In terms of school departments in general, I assume there's probably a similar type study that, Karen?
I would also just highlight, this is our non-union positions, and the school obviously has
Right.
quite a few positions in central office. But, such a huge piece of the school budget and the town budget also is union. And that really needs to be compared. I know my coworker Lisa in the school department certainly looks at comps of other departments and similar communities to see what they're offering their unions. But I think that's probably the bulk of the money. They could certainly do that. I don't know, Joellen, have you done actual school departments in the past, or that's a little bit different, but I think they probably have similar.
Yeah, it is a little bit different. We're actually going to be working with Lynn, but it's going to be on their administrative employees, so not necessarily teachers.
Right.
So there is a little bit of a difference, I think, with the academic side. We've actually looked at our system. We think we could work with the school, but we haven't done one yet. Just Lynn's the first one, and again, it's just the administrative positions.
Well, I know they were concerned about equity within, I think you used the Hockomock League as the base, but it would be nice, I suppose, maybe, to have somebody like Joe Ellen do that, get it out of the.
Making me taller here, Steve. Thank you. Good evening. Just to echo what Jamie started to allude to, on the school side, we do have for the administrative positions throughout the Commonwealth, through the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents and some of our other organizations, they provide comparable salary ranges so that we can get a sense of kind of what a comparable position within the school system in Franklin, if we have a similar position in the curriculum realm or other leadership positions that we can compare it to. So we do try to use those.
Base it off of anything like student population or,
They
area of
factor
the
in-
district, number of buildings, that kind of stuff?
And you try to look at the number of people you're responsible for. If it's an administrative position, they'll look at the types of people below a supervisory position to see what type of structure there is. Because to make it apples to apples, if one district has a director with no subordinates and then a different district has one person who's responsible, that gets factored in as well. And to Jamie's point, you try to use the actuals and what people are actually being paid, because ultimately that's what dictates the market for competitive salary ranges, is to try to recruit that way. So
Thanks. So this is no union people at all in this study at all? This is just, how we call it, rank and
It's
file?
just non-union.
Non-union.
Yeah, the
Okay.
unions traditionally, as I think we all know, do their own comparables.
Is there anybody else in this study group, you know, the Attleboroughs and whatnot, that have actually done this? And
Joellen can certainly speak to that, but there are a number of communities that have used GovHR and other companies in the last few years, people that I've spoken to, or when I went out to look for references. A lot of towns are doing it, I believe. Joellen, you had a huge list of reference communities.
Right. I did, you know, and I actually pulled it up just in case the question was asked, but on the list of your comps, I've done Dedham, Norwood, Walpole, and on Westboro, but just starting down the list, I'll just go through Beverly, Boxborough, Boxford, Boylston, Concord, Danvers, Dartmouth, Dedham, Duxbury, Eastham, Falmouth, Framingham.
so
I'm trying to think.
my point was,
Yeah, a lot.
did it work? Is there any
Every
negative
study has been
response?
implemented.
You know what I mean?
Every study that we've done has been implemented. And I think the reason why is because, you know, as Jamie and Karen will say, it really is a fluid process and it has to work for the community. So while the methodology is the same, while the questionnaires are the same, every community is unique and we have to work with the community to create and implement a plan that is financially, you know, doable and sustainable over time. So yes, they do it, and it's something that we're just very busy because of the market right now. You know, it's busier than it ever has been.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Anybody on Zoom?
Anybody, Chana or Mike? Any questions? Or anybody else out there?
I'm good.
Go ahead, Mike.
He's
Okay,
good.
Great, all right.
No, I don't have any questions.
All right. Okay, I don't see any hands up on Zoom, so, thank you.
Thanks a lot, Joellen.
Thank you, Joel.
See you next
Hey,
week.
you're welcome.
See you next
Yep,
week.
see you next week. Okay, bye-bye. Good night, everyone.
Okay. Okay, the easy part's over. Now the capital plan. Mr. Town Administrator, sir.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm just going to go right to the memo. So I know people are looking online. You can go to our budget page, go to tonight's meeting. There's links. I'm just going to try to do the best I can to cut to the chase. So hopefully the capital plan is pretty straightforward in terms of the amounts, but just for the folks watching at home, the amount of free cash that was available and certified by the state this year was $4.3 million. As tradition has it, we usually hold about $750,000 for snow and ice costs this winter. Our 10% policy for OPEB is $432,000. We're going back to pre-pandemic policies of being able to invest in the fire truck stabilization account, the field stabilization account, and also the proposal tonight before you is to also invest another $1 million into the budget stabilization fund, which would bring that fund up to just over $3 million, which is certainly strong. And as many of you recall, that was a big feature that this committee previous, this committee current, as well as staff working with the rating agencies, this is a critical piece of why we're a AAA bond rating community. Not once, but twice. We just got another AAA award before we went to borrow for Schmitz Farm just at the end of last year. So that after those policy adjustments, if the Finance Committee agrees with those, which have been standard policy for years, that would leave remaining about just under 1.9 million for the typical capital appropriations. Does anybody have any questions on the committee first before I get going on the town policy requests? I know on the second page of the memo there's some updated amounts, but just before we move on to the department requests, I thought I'd just stop and ask if there's any questions about free cash or. You good?
Yeah.
I'm hearing, seeing the heads bob? Okay, good. So the first set of department.
Jerry,
Yeah.
just one quick question, I just noticed. The property projects, 285,000? is that, and then are we putting any in this week? 0 in, so what's the intent with that close to 300 grand?
There's not an official, well, actually, I shouldn't say an official. There is not a stabilization account to accommodate for technology. If you look in the Tim's capital plan, you'll see a request for $500,000 in there every year, which is a great idea that he has. The problem with both technology and public property is they have so many needs that it's very hard to get ahead of that to actually deposit any type of funds into those stabilization accounts. I'm not totally looking to my left, but out of my peripheral vision, I see Mike and Tim. And I guarantee you that they have more than enough to spend money on. So what we've considered the stabilization account, which was created by Jeff many, many years ago, we've just left that alone for now because there's always more projects that can be done in the immediacy. And as I've said in many years before, both the facilities and, hopefully someday we would be able to create a technology stabilization account. At some point we're going to have a strategy. Maybe when our other reserves are up higher at a level that's much more strong, maybe we consider more investments into those. I don't know where that comes. I haven't found a solution to that yet, but generally we see that account there for facilities, Mr. Chairman, and think, if there was really some crisis that we'd have to bail ourselves out of, at least there's some stabilization account there for Mike. So there really is not much more thought beyond that, but at some point we have to try to figure that out.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So batting leadoff tonight on page 3 of the memo, the school department and school facilities. As you know, I try to blend them all together with technology when Tim does have requests. There are 3 requests before you tonight. $325,000 for K through grade 5 English curriculum materials. And the request was, I believe, $400,000 for that. And then the second request is to replace some technology, the teacher laptops to $75,000. I do believe their request was double that as well. And then also RJ and Keller Sullivan Security. We've created lock person traps on all the other schools, and I believe these are the last 2. As I recall, for the new members, Mr. Chairman, and as you know, I traditionally ask, well, actually I don't traditionally, I do ask all of the departments to put all of their priorities for capital in the order of emergency or priority. And these were the issues that rose to the top. So I know the schools are here tonight, the superintendent, school business administrator, and school committee, if anybody has any questions to them.
Guys, anybody? I have one question. The curriculum upgrade, is that hard or soft? Is it books or magnetic data, whatever?
It's a combination. So the contract allows for digital subscriptions. I think that's what we would consider soft. And then on the other side, there's physical books or kits or literacy lab kits, depending on the contract. We're currently assessing multiple. We have a district committee of teachers from across the district that they met today, and they're evaluating to make sure that we're vetting the materials before we make any kind of commitment to that. But a pre-K through 5 purchase of literacy or any type of curriculum material, in order to roll that out, we want to make sure that we are vetting that material.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that we have what we need, but it'd be nice to have it all soft, but I understand it couldn't. So.
I think
is this
both.
1 year?
So this is 1 year, and
so
I'm
each
glad
year they're.
I'm glad you asked that question. It's a 1 year per the amount we talked about. What's allotted, and I know as we come before you, we had like other departments, you have a list, I'm sure, but we had roughly, I think, $950,000 originally in our request, which included replacement of a special education van, included some other pieces, but when asked to prioritize, given the allotted amount, we prioritized the curriculum in this case. It's for to meet the needs of a 1 year curriculum rollout to get the materials, but ultimately the contracts that are coming in are more than the 325, but we're trying to move forward with the literacy implementation. The caveat to that is when you purchase a 1 year or 2 year contract, the way the contracts are designed, the longer you obviously commit to a program, the cheaper it is per year. It's like many other types of things in life. So That's the downside of not trying to get ahead of. In the past, we've been fortunate with the town to have the ability to purchase a multi-year contract, but given the constraints that we're faced with, this is what we're asking for in front of you today.
Okay, thank you.
Just to piggyback on that, so I'm sorry, what happens year two?
So we are going to be, if it's approved and goes through the process, we would use the money to put towards. We'd have to find enough to satisfy the contract. It's a 1 or a 2 year, depending on the materials that they're going to select, and then ultimately we would be back in front of you in future years to try to continue this work. It's not, how we would choose to do it, but that's what we would have to do. So it would be like a 2 year contract. We would have physical hard copies. The licensing would end, and then obviously there's some consumables. When you're dealing with elementary particularly, you'll have some consumable materials that you need to replenish. So we have to consider that as part of our long-term plan and strategy.
So it always stays as CapEx, it never goes to, or capital, it never goes to kind of school operating budget?
So in the past, and I can use an example of a different program where we've spent, I think, a few years ago, we had like a $500,000 allotment that covered us for 5 years. So it drops from that like 325 for 1 or 2 years to 500, and that builds you out, and then you don't come back and ask for that type of curriculum need.
Got it, but it's kind of a special capital,
It's a
always
special-
outside your operating budget.
Yeah, traditionally in Franklin,
Yeah.
capital requests for curriculum to outfit 5 elementaries or, a district our size. We've come before with capital to try to float those purchases. Correct.
Got it.
And this is across all buildings?
This would be, yes, this would be
Wholly
across all of our
elementary.
pre-K elementary schools, to make sure that we have consistency, that every kid across each school would get the opportunity, the teachers would get the materials they need.
Got it. Okay, and I think I'm just trying to understand the difference between when it becomes a capital thing versus when it becomes an operating thing. If you wanted to institute a special curriculum in the high school, where it's just one school, is that also capital, or is that operating?
So if we had a math rollout for a secondary level that included, we've come before for like elementary math,
Yeah.
to roll that out. In high school, depending on the department, it could be a scenario where if it's department specific and it's small enough, we could try to operationalize that through our teaching and learning budget. But when you're doing like a full scale rollout in a content area such as literacy, which really is the plate, it kind of expands all subject areas, that would be a bigger purchase. So that's how
Got it.
we've typically done that.
So is it like baseline stays operating and anything you consider over baseline? Again, I'm just trying to understand
Yeah.
kind of what becomes capital.
We haven't, I don't know if you saw in the notes, but we haven't made a purchase in this area since 2005. So we're up for review. We want to make sure we're providing the highest quality materials for our kids. And something to this nature, like a full-scale rollout of a level, would be something that we would look to fund through a capital investment.
Got it, okay.
Mr. Helen?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Natalie, you bring up an awesome question, which is a debate we've had for years now. The most illustrative example I can use recently are Chromebooks, right? Where there's an annual, as things have evolved in the world, Chromebooks are now just a reality of something that's part of the infrastructure we buy every year, right? And the reality is when is it a capital versus an operating is something we're consistently trying to challenge ourselves on. And I'll give you one more quick example. Some of the police requests, right? I am working with the chief to try to get some of those items into the operating budget. We pay for ammunition in the operating budget, but we don't do tasers, but he comes in and asks every year because tasers now are on a replacement schedule every so years, right? Protective gear for the fire department maybe. Maybe it's curriculum. There's some other items in here. And the reality is that while the policy has generally been one-time cost items like a truck, a van, whatever, traditionally, and I inherited this isn't, something against my predecessor, but I think Lucas and I and the previous superintendent are trying to find that operating budget capacity to try to inject more of these things that we do buy every year, like Chromebooks, and the schools have done a great job getting Chromebook purchasing out of the capital program and into their budget whenever they need fit. We are trying to work towards that. But as you can imagine, you could add up all those items and probably get another $500,000 to $1 million a year, probably more based on what everybody requests. not just recommended. And to find that space in the operating budget is really hard. If you noticed, and I didn't mention it because you brought it up, and I've been thinking about you on this with snow and ice, you probably saw my note in there. In all seriousness, that does give us the ability to get snow and ice this year, hopefully, and some of the road work that we've done into the operating budget, where I think we've all agreed that that's where it belongs, because it's an operating cost. We do it every year, and hopefully free up free cash. And so I think curriculum, if you look at the bottom too, curriculum development is almost a thing that's being modernized every year now, whereas when this capital policy was developed 10, 20 years ago, they mainly only came once every 5 years for curriculum items. So some of it's still shifting as we evolve into the future about what the needs are for the schools or the town stuff. And so we are actively trying, and I know the capital subcommittee will also bring up this issue. And we'd love to wave the magic wand, not that anybody expects us to. We'd love to wave the magic wand and be able to put all of that into the operating budget, but it's just not possible. And so things like curriculum are mandates basically also from the state to some degree. And so some of this is kind of like, well, we have to do this. So we have to do what we have to do. So it is a little bit art and it's a little bit science.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Jamie, just one question. Traditionally, or at least I'd like to see what the requests were and what you recommended. And that's nowhere in here that I've been able to.
It's the second link on the agenda. FY23, it's item 5B.
Okay, I thought that's what I thought.
There's spreadsheets in there, and there's like the cover sheet, and then when you go in, most of the departments have 5-year plans, but for the larger ones like facilities or DPW, I think fire might as well, they have a 10-year window.
I had seen it, I just didn't see it.
Yeah.
I missed the link. Age.
Well, you might want to miss it because the number's really large.
It's all funny right now.
Yeah.
Funny money.
It's funny money.
I'm set. Anybody else? I
Anybody
guess
at home?
you're set. Okay,
All right.
facilities?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, so 2 recommendations for facilities town projects. One is $50,000 for the Davis Thayer cleanout, in addition to a market appraisal. As folks who've been paying attention probably know, the council just established the Davis Thayer Reuse Committee. We'll be putting out a posting for solicitation of the citizens at some point. But in the meantime, while that's all starting, that's for the some of the movers for some of the furniture inside Davis Thayer. And then the second request, which folks will hear about next week at the senior centers, doing a presentation before the council. As all of you probably know, Alicia and I spent 4 months down at the senior center during their transition of leadership, and this was by far the number one thing on the board that the overwhelming amount of seniors had wanted. And I think one of the reasons why was years ago we used to have a regionalized partnership with Medway, and we used their van, and then Medway said, we don't want you anymore, and we then were left without a van. And so we've been able to get through a few years without one, but with the new director and deputy director, and with the desire for a lot of trips as well as medical appointments, it's about time that we fund our own van. I will say, I think I put in here, but just for the folks watching at home, just because we buy the van or approve the van doesn't mean the van's showing up soon. It's going to take a while to do that. We'll talk to our friends in town to see if there's an option there. Mike's done a great job over the years with purchasing vehicles. And then we need people in them to drive them, which will take a little time. So I put my little clause in here. Just, everybody's gonna have to give a year or so for that to be fully funded and see where we're at in terms of getting the van operational and out there doing field trips and fun stuff.
Seems like a great senior work-off.
Not from a liability perspective.
I can't drive? Is that what you're telling me? Okay.
And that's my job, is risk management. So we will be asking for drivers, quarried and the whole bit.
questions, anybody?
Just a simple question. Does this cost assume, like, does it have to be like an ADA accessible, I imagine, with kind of the older age? Does
Yeah.
that make it more expensive as well, I imagine?
Yes, so it's more like a small bus, but it does have a handicap lift in the back of it. So both of the director and the assistant director of the senior center made that very clear, because they have a lot of people who would need help getting into the van.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that was my only question.
Anybody else? No? On we go. Technology department.
Small request from the tech director this year. He's looking to get the police station with some Wi-Fi. So hopefully you guys will support that. And the uninterruptible power supply. I made Tim spell that one out for me. But he's here to answer any questions anybody has.
You know, it occurred to me when I read the UPS, we don't have a generator on the hub of the town?
You guys are answering. You guys are answering this one. I've dealt with this one long enough.
I mean, we've got a boxcar sized one at the high school. You think we could get a medium sized one?
Yeah,
in the
why don't you
backyard here?
both get up here? And, why don't you go ahead and tell them?
So you still need UPSs.
Well, I understand to go for the.
Generators, Mike.
Yeah.
But we do have a generator, a portable generator that's been on order since March.
I do, that was last year, I think.
Yeah, and we took bids on it. We sent them a contract, and they have said at different times that it'd be like coming in around Thanksgiving, and we still haven't got a date when they're building it. It's a rather large generator. It's 175 kW, but it can power up the entire building. But we need that time in between. Just to talk about that also is the fire department did apply for a small generator that could span an interim time for us to run down, grab the generator and bring it here, and would at least, so you need the UPS. We were awarded the grant for what's called a red plug generator that just does the box in the electrical panel in here and the electrical panel in the MDF. And then we're running across town, grab the other one, and bring the whole building up.
So it's stuck in the mail with the traffic light at Grove and Washington Street.
And they have.
Just want to remind everybody, we're still waiting for that light that was supposed to show up last March as well.
Oh, well. Okay, I just thought I'd ask. Anybody else? No? Town Administrator and Building Commissioner. Oh, weights and measures.
Yep, so
Oh, he's,
Gus, this may be your first capital meeting, so 25 years. So through you, Mr. Chairman, in all seriousness, there's two requests on here. One for the sealers of weights and measures equipment, because the state's now not doing it, and our illustrious building commissioner is, and $80,000 for the demolition of Schmidt's farm, the home. Both projects will be under the control of the building commissioner, and he'll be leading both of those. So he's here to answer any questions folks have.
did the new title move him up in the compensation plan?
I'm not going to Cambridge.
That will come back to haunt me. Questions?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
The weights and measures equipment, so you have the price, but it says used, so I imagine that you have already found it and have like ready to go?
As far as
Like, because it says the weights and measures equipment that you need, it says it's used, so I'd just imagine you've already found it in order to have a price of used equipment,
Well,
or is
that's
that
the
just?
vehicle, I think.
actually, it's a used vehicle.
Oh, the vehicle.
Yeah, it's just
okay.
the used truck.
Vehicle
Yeah.
and,
Right.
oh, okay, got it.
And to be honest with you, I'm probably halfway there with all the equipment right now. It's taken a while, there's some things on back order, just like the traffic light. So, but we're
It's
working
coming in
pretty
the same
hard
box.
to get it and make sure that everybody's serviced with what we need to do. County Commissioners.
Yeah.
I mentioned that.
Yeah.
Norfolk County Commissioners have attempted to step up, which is huge for us. It'll kind of take the pressure off of me if they create a regionalization of weights and measures in Norfolk County. It's encouraging.
Okay.
There's a lot of supermarkets and gas pumps in this town. That's what you'd be doing,
About 650 devices
really.
total.
Okay?
It's also grocery stores, cannabis, it's all that stuff, anything with a weight. It's a public protection, I mean,
Is the county paying for it with what they withheld in the opera fund? Sorry.
that's pretty
Okay.
sassy, no.
Anybody else? No? Thank you, sir. Fire department.
Yeah, so through Mr. Chairman, I think the chief and the deputies will speak to this, but about just under 380,000 in requests for firefighter clothing, portable radios, combustible gas meters, ALS simulators, command vehicle, and 2 mini cutters. If you have any questions, I'm sure the chief will come up and talk a little bit more detail. I think, as I said before, to Natalie's point, there's some items in here in the future we'd love to just bake into the operating budget, but we'll have to wait for the time and space to do that.
Based on the number of calls I hear, is 4 gas meters enough? Yeah? Yeah, okay. Can we rent out the ALS simulator to surrounding people? Just make a few bucks on the side?
That's actually a good question. We're waiting to see if we get it first, but if we did, that's actually, nobody around here, I can't say, has anything like that. So it would be something we could look into, because I think there would be a need right around, particularly in the MEC towns for starters. Even beyond that, we could probably do that, reach out to them.
Based on the number of times they're in here, it would be nice to know they're trained properly.
Yeah. So for calendar year, this past calendar year, it was 247 mutual aids in, because I figured you'd want to know. So that's what the mutual aid was, so, which is up, and this past calendar year, we went over 5,000 for the first time as well. So the numbers are all up, as you know. So, but that's a great thought, if we are successful getting that, it's a great thought for the neighboring communities to offer that up.
Well, we need them.
Yeah.
And is the only other question I have is the old engine one, do you have all the equipment you need to make it a true rescue?
We're working on that right now. Through Department of Fire Services, we got $25,000 to secure some technical equipment. We're looking to get some dive equipment as well. We had some loaned to us from Wellesley that we're inventorying right now, so we're trying to get that truck stocked for incidences that don't happen all the time, but are highly technical, and we have our firefighters doing some extra technical training beyond the tech rescue team as well. So we're trying to fit that truck with all the things that we don't use every day, but in case we do, we'll be ready to go, both the training and the specialized equipment.
Questions? Bill Dowd's not here, I'm sure he's got some.
I just, Mr. Chairman, I just don't want to lose sight of page 9. I know some of these things are familiar, and I know we'll get to it at the end, but I just wanted to have the chief speak to FY24 capital and beyond. On there is a list of a ladder truck. Those sheets on that second link show a lot more, and I know there's the Tri-County School and police station and all that other stuff on this list, but this is a new one, so I thought maybe the chief could just talk to the situation with the ladder truck. Given all the supply chain issues we're talking about, I just thought he could talk about that for a quick minute.
2 things on the tower. A, I counted today, within the next year, we'll have 27 apartment buildings, 4 stories. You just need that piece of gear to get there, and then you add in 4 hotels.
Yep.
The new one up on Union Street, whatever, is that Upper Union or whatever it is, is about to open or will open soon. So we'll have 4 of them, and they're all 4 stories. And I wouldn't want to go up on a straight stick myself, but.
We would want to stick with a platform, the safety of our folks as well as the person we're taking out. But regarding the ladder, I did mention it briefly at the FinCom last year and at the budget meetings as well. 3 biggest concerns I have is in the last several years, the cost of what we're putting into our current tower, which is a 2008. The last 2 or 3 years, what the cost of these vehicles have gone up is a concern. But most importantly, number 3, is the delivery now of these vehicles. It's probably 24 to 36 months out from the time we order a vehicle now. We did reach out to the vendors in the last 4 or 5 months. We got pricing on the frame rail of that tower, what that cost would be, what our total refurb of that truck would be, what a trade-in value of that truck would be, and what a new purchase would be. And we've got all that data on both what we put into that truck now. I just feel at this particular point in time, if it's 24 or 36 months out, I do think this is the time to have the serious conversation. I think it's the right thing to do. I think doing a refurb, my concern with a refurb is once they start peeling these trucks apart, they find more things, and it gets out of control. You feel like you have no control over it. I just think it's a 15-year-old truck today, and if we act fairly soon, we'd have that in FY25 or FY26 as the purchase time. I just think it's that time that we have to make a decision now. I'd hate to go 2 or 3 years and then have nothing here. A refurb, for example, you have to give it 6 months to make an appointment to get it done, and then they have it from 12 to 18 months. That's if they refurb it. So we're going to be out of a truck for 1.5 years. What do? Nobody's got an extra truck around to loan us for the most part. So that's why I'm bringing it up now. I just think it's the time. I think it's the time. So I appreciate it.
I have a financial question. If you order it, we don't pay for it until it ends up at 40 West Central, right? Or do we? Or is there a financial implication now versus in FY25 when it shows up?
Yeah. Well, you'd have to have an authorization, from the legislative body, which is kind of like where you.
Yep.
Thanks, Chris. Which is where I'll let him finish my thought. Go ahead, Chris.
Chris Sandini through the chair. I've seen it done both ways. I've seen where they've offered a discount if you give a deposit up front. So I've seen it both ways.
A deposit is not something.
It's not the entire amount, but it might be like 50%.
Okay. Depends on rates, I would guess, because this is not a free cash item. This is a debt item, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And I think in talking with the finance staff earlier, we just did get a 3.44 interest rate in December when we borrowed for Schmidt. I think we all anticipated that being at least 1% higher, which is good news for a lot of things, right? And so I did talk to the finance staff to try to model out what it would look like, primarily because we're also at a point, as all of you know, where the debt and interest service is coming down on the operating budget. And I frequently said we need to make sure that that gets up a lot higher so that percentage market share of the operating budget reflects debt and interest, which is healthy for a lot of reasons. But then beyond that, I have been concerned, I think like all of us, about interest rates. I mean, who isn't? And so the 3.44 that we got for Schmidt in December, might have given us a little bit of a breath for a minute. And if the finance team can create can come up with some innovative ideas, which, Chris just kind of alluded to a little, maybe that is something where we can try to find the right financial mechanism to be able to get the order in, a deposit here, or whatever, knowing that we wouldn't have to pay the full rate until probably FY25 anyway. If we're looking at the Chiefs 24 to 36 months, ordering it, in a month or two, that's still a long time away. So the finance team is going to crunch the numbers and look at some ideas and talk to our financial consultants to see what the options might be, given that the interest rate we just got with the AAA was pretty good considering the circumstance.
The other issue, again, I pay attention. I listen to 1,000 calls a week. The 4th ambulance, it took us how long to get the 22? 18 months?
18 months?
18 to 20?
It was up there. It was about
Probably at least a year and a half.
Yeah,
Yeah,
18
so,
months, yeah.
And I think they're all in pretty good shape, but
They are.
same question, do we want to get in the queue now for the oldest unit? It's 2014, if I.
Right.
We have a 22, a 21, a 17, and a 14.
Right, so we'd like to get, if it's allowed, we'd like to get in a 2.5-year cycle. A lot of departments around us right now are having a tough time waiting, they can't get the chassis. And we're really in good shape compared to what's going on around us. But we need to keep ahead of it, to your point, and we're looking at that 2.5-year mark, which will be coming on in the spring, to place another order if that works out. If that works out.
Okay, just
How much are those?
a
They're
lot.
up- they're up to,
330?
No, no, they're at 4 now.
4.
So that is a free cash thing.
Well, we have the state.
It's in the ambulance, yeah, well, you have both the stabilization account, you have the ambulance receipts to try to pay for that, and, you know, if all else fail, I mean, you obviously can do a borrowing, although not usually on that type of an item, but I just want to add one more element where I thought you were going, George, which is, we also know that when the apparatus shows up, it may not be in the condition we want it to be, and so that's another factor about timing. You know, the chief says we'll be out with a ladder truck for maybe a year and a half. Even when the truck arrives, for that kind of money, you want to say everything's perfect, but we know that that's not the case
That's on
as
the
well.
refurb, is that
Right.
what you're saying?
Yeah. So,
Other than that, you guys are in pretty good shape.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate, we
The
are.
tower and an
That's the
ambulance.
last piece of the tower, yeah.
An engine 3 in probably 10 years? Guess?
Yeah.
7 or 8, 10 years.
No, we're in terrific shape.
it's 100 years to me. 10 years.
I hope I live to see it.
Me too.
Okay, we're set, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to clarify, so because just on the ladder truck, because it sounds like it's a need to happen, so we're waiting on the finance committee to crunch numbers and come back to us with kind of recommendation?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep, the finance staff. Yep.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Police department.
Yep. So, through you, Mr. Chairman, so the recommendation is just a hair under 400,000 for the police, 338,000 for replacement of vehicles, 14,000 for tasers, about 17,000 for protective body armor, 21,250 for speed enforcement trailer, message boards, and then some technology equipment, which the chief usually asks for some software and stuff. Again, back to Natalie's point a little while ago, I did actually ask this year the chief to put these items in the operating budget, just as a request to see where it all kind of fell out, where the numbers fall out. I think some of the lower cost items are things that, you know, I'm hopeful that we will be able to get in the operating budget on a more routine basis. The bigger question is going to be the police vehicles. Kind of similar to computers, we now order them every year for good reason. It is something that we are trying to come up with some creative solutions, maybe some other stabilization account, maybe some revolving account from fees to try to help out, some different ideas. But obviously to get $350,000 a year, as I remind everybody, our electricity rate and costs for just the town is going to go up $350,000 next year alone. I don't know if we can make that commitment. Regardless of that, we'll get to that in May, but regardless of that, obviously we need these ordering of these cruisers now. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the chief just got the cruisers that were ordered last year. Okay, he is not. Maybe they're in Cambridge. But, but in all seriousness, I think he will come up and explain the same dynamic that everybody has, that ordering these and waiting is incredibly difficult. And one more quick point to remind the Finance Committee and the folks at home. Most towns have to go through town meeting for these appropriations, and they don't get to order this stuff till July and August in the summer when it's a huge bottleneck. We have a huge advantage to order these earlier, and we're still having problems. So imagine what it's like in other communities that have to wait till the summer when 90% of the towns go out and order their stuff. We have a little bit of a head start, And I think as the chief will tell you, you know, we're still having a difficulty getting vehicles in, which is, you know, obviously concerning. Not like we can do much about it. So, so Chief, I don't know if you have anything else. Is that a good overview or?
Oh, excellent overview.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Is that for you?
Imagine if he told you it was terrible.
Yeah.
Is that the
I'm a
Cambridge?
Brookline kid.
Is that the
We're not fond of
Cam-
Cambridge. They're always competing with us. Born and raised. Yes. So, as the town administrator, Mr. Helen said, yeah, for us, the cruises have been in stock from the moment we ordered them after we got approved through Capital for 22. The problem is the Motorola radios are taking forever to come in for the unmarked cruises, and the chips necessary for federal signals to build the light bars that we use are still not available. But we are getting, I was told that next week we're getting the 2 unmarked units, and the marked units are not far behind. They finally got the, they must have undid the blockade around Taiwan or something so that we could get the chips that we need for the light bars. But that's the issues you know, that we're having, like everybody else, when it comes to these supply things. But hopefully we'll get them. And he is correct also, our free cash, the way we use it, do our capital, you know, we're going in usually around February, you know, to order these cars where everybody else is showing up around, you know, mid-July trying to do the same thing. I ran the fleet for 14 years. It was nice to walk into, used to be MHQ, and there was nobody there. You know, back in July, the place is just crazy. Everybody's trying to get their stuff, and everybody's behind, especially the upfitting, because everybody's trying to get their cars upfitted at the same time. Upfitting being all the lights, buy the car from the company, and then they outfit the cruisers with all the lights, the sirens and everything.
What are they going for now?
65 grand for utility, which is the SUV, the Explorer. We don't do sedans. They're just too small. They're not able to carry anything. Tired of seeing people hitting their heads on the A-frame and everything else. So that's basically what we're going for. But that's all, with all the equipment, everything's getting more. That's the computers, I mean, Motorola radio is $5 grand alone. It's $1,000 to mark them.
Speaking of, again, you know I pay attention. What happened to the tower that was going to be built to help? I mean,
You mean up on the north side of town?
yeah, I mean, I can listen, and the guys, thank God they have cell phones, I guess, to call, because the radio's horrible.
So, for whatever reason, you know, to be honest with you, I'm not really sure all the dynamics. Last year during Omicron, I think there was the tower up on the north side of town was approved by the ZBA. There is a condition in there that the town gets the top 40 feet for all of the
But
equipment.
he was just at the ZBA to get a year's extension.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and you know, it might be market-based stuff. It might be supply chain issues. Maybe labor costs to build it. It could be leasing from the telecom companies. It's a myriad of issues. It could be, you know, personal issues. You know, we don't really know. I've had Mike D'Angelo try to work out, costing out what the equipment would cost to put on there. But without them building the tower, there's really not much else for us to do. And I'm guessing they just need more time, just like everybody else, to build what they started. And it's kind of like the questions I get about the solar farm on Spring Street. When do I get my discount? You know, and for whatever reason, it's just taking a long time to get everything, just like all the other issues, you know, that we've been talking about. I think my educated guess tells me that's the hang up. But obviously, that company was great to work with, and we're appreciative that they gave us the top space, and we'll get some stuff up there when we can.
I think he said he was having trouble getting the lease from Verizon cell. That was the issue.
At some point, he still has to erect a tower. Otherwise, I mean, you know, I don't know if I'm just an idiot here, but it's like at some point I'll deal with it when the tower's built. You know, I got too many other things to think about until that guy builds the tower. Yeah, Chief.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, we just had a meeting on this past Friday with Michael and Cybercom, who's the radio company that we utilize. I don't know much about what's going on with the tower and everything, but what can we do in the interim? We know where the so-called dead spots are, especially in the north and a little bit in the east, that we're having problems with. The tower would solve them all, but there is another solution that we're working on. trying to update our FCC license to be able to simulcast, and then potentially being able to turn on the transmitter that is actually on Keller Sullivan. It's a receiver, but there's also a transmitter, so we're only transmitting from one location. They can get out, but they can't hear anything coming in. And this would potentially solve some of those problems in the interim, but there is still some equipment that needs to be purchased. It's not going to be instantaneous until the tower goes up. If the tower goes out and we do have a simulcast license, we'll also be able to put a receiver with a transmitter on that tower as well up there, and that should really solve all the issues that we have right now.
It's just, somebody out there and can't talk if he's in trouble, it's tough. Can't get back. Oh well.
Hopefully by the end of the decade, we'll have that all, solved out there.
Okay.
It's not that far away.
Questions, guys? Set?
Thank
All
you.
set. Thank you. Thank you.
And last, Mr. Chairman, but by no means least, Department of Public Works. As everybody knows, there's a few items here. One, from free cash for highway and grounds. The recommendation is $390,000 total, $245,000 for a 6-wheel dump truck, sander and plow, $75,000 for a 10-wheel dump truck, and a 1-ton dump truck of $70,000. As you note on the second one, we'll walk through those with water and sewer as well, as many of you know, but for those, this is their first meeting. We traditionally, with equipment that is shared between highway, grounds, water, and sewer departments, and also stormwater, in this case, we typically share those costs based off the usage. I want to note on here, stormwater, where it says 20%, somebody asked me this the other day, well, how can stormwater pay for anything? There's no money. It's true. We're anticipating our first stormwater utility budget starting July 1st. So that 20% that's referenced in here will actually be in the operating budget proposal for the utility in the budget. So we'll take highway and grounds first. We got Tony with us tonight to make his finance committee debut. We're gonna see his bearded mug a little bit more often, I think, wherever Brutus is. We're not sure. But Tony's here to answer any questions for highway and grounds that folks may have.
So am I correct? We're going to buy two big trucks. One of them free cash from here, $245.
Yep.
Correct.
And then the 10-wheel, and I don't think the 10-wheel comes from free cash, a bit from the sewer reserve or whatever it's called.
And a bit from the water.
Free cash, maybe, and water free cash, and the 3 pay for the truck.
Correct. They're technically called retained earnings by the Department of Revenue. We just want to they want to confuse you more.
And the one-ton dump is just straight free cash.
Yeah.
The third item.
Yep. For highway and parks.
Yeah, the first item and the third item, the 350 and the H38, the 99 GMC.
Yeah.
Both of those are vehicles that have already been auctioned off, and we just haven't had money allocated to replace them. And they're very essential pieces of equipment involved in our daily tasks and winter operations.
I assume we'll run into the same problem of it's going to be a year before you even see them or something.
Yeah, what's that look like?
We just got word from the car dealership that we just got a truck that landed in Albany that we've been waiting on for 13 months. And that's just the utility body. And those smaller trucks seem to be at a very high demand right now. We're trying to outfit cab and chassis and put bodies on them, and it's a mess right now. Everyone's really trying to push to get all their vehicles in and get upfitted for the upcoming season, so it's tough.
We haven't been beat to death with snow yet, so we're moving on.
Knock on wood, please.
Yeah, I know. Sorry I said it. I'm set. Anybody else?
I'm good.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you very much.
We don't
Good
bite.
job. And then moving down on page 6, the water enterprise funds. The proposal is to, if folks know, I put in a little notation in here about our retained earnings. Our town policy is $1 million in reserves, but given the cost-driving element of things, we're requesting to maintain that number just under 1.5 million. And the projects for the water department, as if they don't have enough already, with all of the ARPA funds and the great work that Doug and his staff are doing. The first request is $645,000 for PFAS remediation in well 7, which is currently offline. The second request is the design and pilot for the Fisher Street treatment plant at about $467,000. Some vehicles and equipment at $75,000. We just talked about that with the dump truck. And then our standard $50,000 a year for water meter replacements. I just want to let everybody know, and I will not be as awful, Doug, as I was the other day in our capital meeting about my feelings on PFAS. But ultimately, at the end of the day, as I articulate in here, it's a controversial issue. It's expensive. The reality is that it's a regulatory issue we have to deal with, and also it's a public health issue regarding well 7 and making sure that all of our wells are in tip-top shape to be able to be available to the ratepayers and the citizens and businesses in town. I do want to warn the public, this is going to cost likely for many communities, maybe not Franklin, but for a lot of communities, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars in compliance over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. My frustration with it is that, unlike other chemicals in the past, it seemed like the regulatory environment just came up out of nowhere. And the state is putting some money behind this, but as they usually do, they're putting nowhere near the amount of money that it takes for us to fund this stuff at the level of the requirements and the specificity that they're asking us to. When lead happened, right, lead removal back years ago, it was pretty obvious it was pretty obvious that getting rid of lead everywhere was a priority because it clearly had documented public health impacts. I'm not saying that PFAS, I'm going to go drink a cup of it, but it is still a part of manufactured items that we consume every single day. And so I just have an issue with the fact that I'm not sure where this falls on the priority ladder for the environmental regulatory community. We're getting hit with stormwater fees. We have to do that for 30 years. And now this. And it just feels like the federal and state government aren't chipping in almost any money on this stuff. And so it is a little frustrating. I don't normally go off on unfunded mandates and this type of stuff. But my frustration with this is it really, it's not as if this chemical is good. I'm not saying we should consume it, but I'm just not so sure we've seen really what the liability is right in front of our face like we've done with many other things in the environmental movement for years. At the end of the day, though, as Doug does a phenomenal job with his team planning out his capital plan, after my rant in the office the other day, he still looks at me and says, but DEP regulates us and we have to do it because that's what the law is. So that's why I bumped that issue up to number 1, because the state's making us do this. And I also want to assure the public, as the water reports have had in the past, and Doug can speak to this a little bit too with PFAS, we've done testing for PFAS well in advance of what the regulatory requirements were for years. And we really did perform really, really well and well under the thresholds. Only this one instance, I think a year ago, did the testing finally just trip right over a little bit. When there was a story in the Boston Globe several years ago, there were a lot of worried residents in town for good reason that they thought there was widespread PFAS contamination everywhere in town. That is not the case. People can drink the water out of their faucets. It is safe. And I want to assure everybody, as Doug will too, that the health and being of our drinking water is in excellent shape. And by no means does this appropriation tonight somehow should result in any type of panic in the community. So with that as a background, that's the water recommendations for the year.
I don't see the word PFAS in here.
I don't want to say it. No, it's on page 6 down at number A. You mean what does it stand for?
Well, no. I don't know it stands for.
Me neither.
Wrong spot.
I'm not sure Doug does, but I bet you he does. He may not know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, it's very long.
He knows what it is. He can't pronounce the words.
Yeah.
And then it says like, well, he says.
He might be looking at the.
What is,
Oh,
You can't go in through the link, you have to go in through the email.
Oh, the updated memo.
is it a naturally occurring substance in the water that comes out of the wells? That's my question.
I'm just an annoyed town manager. I'm gonna let the I'm gonna let the experts answer that question.
So,
Or is it something we create with
It-
fertilizer or grass seed, for Christ's sake?
it's PFAS is a man-made chemical. It was developed, I don't know, back in the 70s, 60s. Basically Teflon, Scotchgard, any like waterproofing clothing. I probably got on right now. We're all wearing it, right?
Totally.
It's in the environment. It's actually still being produced.
So,
Yeah.
we, the general public, in a sense, created it, goes into the ground, and comes back out in the water.
Correct.
That's right. And so the lack of
And it
accountability from the feds or state to say, don't make it anymore. Oh, but keep making it. Oh, but now we're gonna mandate you clean it all up.
But it doesn't
Is
make-
ridiculous.
Doesn't make my ears fall off or my nose fall off.
We're still trying to figure out exactly what falls off from it.
All right.
Because we eat it every day on Teflon pans when we cook food on our pans at home. And if you wear makeup, it's in makeup, right, Doug? It's in lipsticks.
makeup, yeah.
It's in all sorts of makeups. But go clean it out of the water.
So
Plaster it on your face all day, lick it, eat it, drink it, but go clean it up when it's in the river.
Okay, we beat that one to death. We shall move on.
You have no idea.
in case you want to know how he feels.
We ought to have a representative at those meetings. That would be fun.
Just
so, other than that, any questions, guys? No?
I appreciate that.
Okay. Move on. All right, we're on to sewers, I think.
All right, the sewer enterprise funds, again, the same thing. We're asking to keep the retained earning amount at 1.237 million, just a little bit higher than what we usually ask. And I do want to commend Doug and Jake. They are working on a policy because we do all agree that our thresholds for savings probably should go up a little bit in the future. So we'll try to bring those back next year when we do the financial policies. But the sewer ejector station replacement, $125,000. The Phase 6, Part 2 of the sewer rehabilitation project is $500,000. Some equipment and vehicles, notably the generator for Don Marie, is $60,000, and then some additional equipment and trucks, like we had talked about before. And then one thing that our departments do exceptionally well is I&I, inflow and infiltration work. And so $200,000 to continue our incredible efforts on that stuff.
How many sewer stations do we have in town? I know too many. That I understand.
We have 23 sewer lift stations, about to be 24 when the Beaver Street sewer station goes in. So, and just to reiterate on Jamie's point, so that Phase 6, Part 2, $500,000, that will finish off all the I&I recommendations we had for lining and manhole rehabilitations. So that's where D comes into play. We need to start doing some more flow assessment for other areas of town. So that's where that will
You
come
actually we basically save some money on that because it doesn't go to Medway
Correct.
and get charged there, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yep. We're trying to work with Medway to push them along towards some more I&I work too for the betterment of the system.
They don't have enough water to worry about it.
They don't have enough sewer either.
I know. Questions?
Through you, Mr.
good.
Chairman,
Thank you.
and then there's the last page, just to give the public a heads up. Some of the big items that are not on those 10-year capital plans was the ladder truck we already talked about. I'm anticipating, we're not sure yet, Brutus said he was going to get me a time today, but he didn't, but the pavement management plan is going to be coming up soon with results, which will also include sidewalks and town asset parking lots. 40 million plus number here is from 5 years ago, so I'm sure that's a lot more, but it'll be a never-ending task. The police station, as folks know, we just did approve a committee to start working on the building of the renovation and/or expansion of the police station. And then Tri-County is coming before the council on February 1st. They have a $300 million plus request for a new school up on the hill, and then the landfill cap and recycling center. Mr. Chairman, we have finally made some progress on checking off all the boxes with the land swap. We hope to have that done and anticipate that being done in addition to the actual land transaction by the end of this calendar year, excuse me. We would hope that hopefully in FY24 we'll be able to get to the solid waste master plan and trying to design out a recycling center up on Beaver Street. And so those are some of the other items. Happy to, and then on page 10, just so folks know, I've got a glossary there about what is free cash and how it's not free for the taxpayer. And then we have all the 20-year free cash and retained earnings history in case anybody has any questions.
Is there a reason this, I think, is the highest in that list anyway? Is it pandemic related or just low budgeting?
I think, through Mr. Chairman, so if you look at, that's a good, if everybody looks at the list under general fund, which is the second column in from the right,
That's
I think
what we're spending.
I think what George is pointing to are those two large numbers down in 21 and 22. I do agree that number one, they are pandemic related, a lot of transitions, a lot of different contract negotiations, a lot of staff gaps where all of that excess revenue that's not spent during the year. I think it's also a big credit to our department heads and staff and how they manage their budgets. They're exceptionally diligent about making sure to get the best price for the best quality product. And we have had some staffing transitions, I think, in the mid-level jobs and certainly in the labor areas. And so I do think that reflects it. In addition, you know, a lot of towns did struggle depending on your demographics. You know, the Berkshires struggled mightily without all those with all that revenue loss during the pandemic. Foxborough lost almost $5 million in hotel and meals tax revenue for that year. I think part of this also was even during the pandemic, folks were being really creative, like the building commissioner. They were doing inspections over FaceTime. And so revenues were down for the hotels, but as we all know, they weren't as bad as many other communities. And so I think with the way the departments manage their budgets and all of those dynamics led to higher than usual free cash totals. So we remain, I don't know, what's the term, cautiously optimistic that that'll continue, but we do have to brace someday for maybe those numbers going back down to reality, but you know, we'll see what happens in another year.
It's called Budget Stabilization Fund.
Budget Stabilization Fund.
Yeah, that's what it's called. Okay, anything else? Mr. Helen, you done?
Yep.
Anybody else? No? Motion to adjourn?
Well,
Nope. Oh,
you got to make
yeah.
a motion to approve the capital plan as is to move on to the subcommittee.
Okay, do we have one in here, or do I just offer it as I?
Offer it as you see it, Mr. Chairman.
I move that the Finance Committee endorse the capital plan as presented by Mr. Helen, the Town Administrator, this evening, and discussed thoroughly.
Second.
Roll call.
Roll call.
All right, George?
Yes.
Natalie?
Yes.
Chenna?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Nicole is yes.
Passed.
7-0.
7-0.
Thank you.
Anything else that I forgot?
You got a couple more items down the list. Just discussion, doesn't have to, I'm happy to go home. All right, it's just there. Really quickly, stabilization funds, if anybody has any questions, we've been asked to put them on the agenda. The FY23 year to date, we have a report in there. I think it's nothing shocking. We've talked about facilities and DPW, and things look overall very, very good. But I think as we enter the home stretch, those are the two departments we'll have to watch throughout the year. And I just included in the Mass Municipal Association letter to the incoming governor, which I thought for the Finance Committee would be helpful to read. It is long, it is comprehensive, but I do think it reflects, I did send it around to the department heads too. It does reflect, I think, the widespread set of issues that are not just in Franklin, but across the state, that our incoming governor has to deal with. But I just wanted to send that to everybody, to give everybody else a perspective on things like rural state aid, you know, is a really, really big issue. And it's something that, you know, is a big priority, even though it doesn't affect Franklin. And so I thought that would be of interest to maybe some folks. So other than that, all set.
Okay, one comment. There is an agenda item listed, 2023 Finance Committee committee adjustments, which many of you don't even know what they are. Traditionally, this committee has assigned several members to each department in the town as like a liaison. The reality is it didn't work. It wasn't used, so I unilaterally eliminated it. Okay? I think from what I think you can tell from our discussions last week with the school committee, this one, we ask our questions, and people here should, the committee should remember that if they want to go meet with the police chief or the fire chief or the superintendent of schools, just let myself or Natalie know and have at it. I don't think anybody out there would not want to talk. So just be aware, you're more than welcome to go talk to anybody. Okay, and that's why I think I'm as involved as anybody, and I think I had one meeting with Jim McLaughlin. That was it, since 2013. So it was just a useless exercise in futility. On that, motion to adjourn?
Second?
Roll call.
Yes.
George?
Yes.
Natalie?
Yes.
Chenna?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Nicole is yes.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.